Hi, everybody. It's Ruth Rumack here, founder and executive director of education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. And I am so glad that you have joined us this evening for our Love of Reading webinar. We've got lots of people coming. I'm going to give them a couple of minutes just to trickle in. I know that it's after dinner time and it was such a beautiful day out. Maybe you barbecued your dinner, not quite sure. But as we allow people to come in, I would love to know a little bit about you guys. And I'd like to know, how old are the children that you're thinking of, so that I can sort of gauge the talk and understand what age range I'm talking to, so that we can have a lovely discussion as we go along. I will be opening up for questions at certain points over the webinar, and I hope to be able to answer the questions that you already sent in previously. I have some excellent questions here to answer, and as well as be there to answer your questions as we go along. So, thank you. Dream 16, mother of 3, age 11, 6, and 6 months. Oh my goodness, Dream 16, you have a very busy household. Excellent. So really everything that we talk about is going to be applicable for you because you've got somebody in every age range. Lovely. Anybody else that would love to share, like to share the ages of the students or the children that they're thinking of? That will help me gauge where our audience is at and what they may be wanting to know. All right, we'll let some of those answers come up. What else can I tell you? Well, I think, let's see, what time do we have? 7:01. All right, I'm going to get started, and as people come in, they will join us. So first of all, I want to welcome you all, and I really appreciate that you're taking some time this evening to sit with me and to learn something new perhaps, or maybe reconnect with some ideas that you already knew about and you need to refresh, or you want some new ideas to infuse your reading at home as well. All right, let us begin our slideshow. Hit it, Joelle. Joelle's my trusty assistant. She's our outreach coordinator, and she's the one that presses the button as we go forward. We'll give that screen a moment to come up. It's coming. It's coming. Fabulous. All right, we've got some other people joining us. I have 2 girls, 6 and 10 years old. Fabulous. So we've got 2 with 2 children at about the same age. And anybody else who'd like to share the ages of the kids that they have in their lives, the household, or if you're a teacher, maybe the students, the age of the students that you're working with. All right. Well, raising a reader. Reading is all around us. And we have an opportunity to work with our young kids to really set the foundation, set the stage for success, for later reading and spelling success. But it starts really quite early. And when we look around at everything, I mean, print is everywhere. It's on our phones, it's on the television, it's on billboards, it surrounds us. And really, in order to be successful in today's world, we need to be competent and strong readers. And how do we do that? Now, not everybody comes into the world with the same skills, but the lovely thing about reading is that it is something that we can teach from the ground up, and we can also make sure that we are instilling a love for reading so that our kids really gravitate towards books and print. And I know it doesn't work for everybody. I know not everybody is a reader and sees themselves as a reader, but part of my job at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space is to make sure that we are encouraging our kids to love print and to surround themselves with really interesting things to read, and make sure that they are feeling comfortable with it and that they're getting the skills that they need to continue to be successful. All right, let's take a look at our next slide. That's me. There we go. Just a little bit about us. If you don't know who we are, Ruth Rumack's Learning Space is an academic support center in Toronto. We have 2 locations, one at Spadina and Bloor and one at Midtown at Davisville and Yonge. Right now, we are completely virtual. We've gone online as of the last year, but we will be getting back to our in-person lessons. We do a variety of things. Really, we're based on the pedagogy of one-to-one or direct instruction, which means that we really work from the bottom up, establishing strong skills, giving our students the skills and the strategies and the tools that they need to be successful in whatever subject they're working on. And we work one-on-one, we have small group classes, as well as we create different products and resources, lots of books. We're going to talk about the books in a little while. And we really work to find the best way to access that students' enthusiasm. Our lessons are engaging and they're dynamic, and we really work with what's called a kinesthetic or a multimodal and multisensory model. So we get our kids moving, we want them to be involved, we do a lot of hands-on activities. It really makes the learning and the teaching come alive, and it keeps them engaged, and therefore the more fun you're having, the more engaged you are, the more you enjoy the learning, the more you want to come back for more learning. And that's really our philosophy. Our students should leave happier than when they came in. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. So how do we get started here? How do we establish a love for reading? Well, I do think that it starts early on. And this idea of reading really stems from language and playing with language and language development. So let's take a look at the next slide. And we're going to talk about that early language development, give you a little bit of an overview before we dive into the nitty-gritty of how reading actually happens. So let's start with early language development. It really starts in the womb. And some of you may have talked to your bellies or had partners or had younger siblings talk to the belly. And that baby at 14, or the fetus at 14 weeks, can actually start to distinguish sound. And they're hearing different voices and they're hearing different sounds coming through. And those individual sounds that we hear are called phonemes. That's that one individual piece of sound that we hear in spoken language. And that's going to be important for us to know later on. But if we look at language development early in the womb and early in an infant's life, they can start at 4 months to already distinguish between a spoken word and then another noise like a dog barking or a clap or a door shutting. And at 6 months, you start to hear the babbling and those, lovely coos and the babbles and the giggles. That is really the first sign of language learning. But even before that, when they're in utero, every time that they are hearing a new sound and that sound center in the brain is stimulated, it's creating a stronger neural path, which allows the messages to travel in the brain and to create a reaction. And it's also training the ear. So the sound system, the ear system, and the language processing system are starting to be developed quite early on. Now, one of the cool things about us as humans is that we actually have the potential to recognize all the sounds of all the languages in the world. And there are 800 different phonemes or different sounds that are used in spoken languages throughout the world. And because we have this propensity, this ability, innate ability to recognize these sounds, it means that we as infants can absorb a lot of languages and differentiate between the languages as we go. So if you do have a dual household, a dual language household, or more than one language, 2 languages, 3 languages spoken in the household, a child will absorb those different sounds and know how to identify which one belongs with which language. I know from my own nieces and my nephews particularly, were brought up in a house that had 2 languages, and they knew who to speak which language to. So, because we didn't speak one of the languages that they did, they were able to speak to us only in English. But when they were with their relatives that spoke another language, they were able to communicate with them easily and switch between the 2 languages, even at a very young age. So I have a question for you, and I'm wondering if you want to put it in the chat. So if we said that there are 800 phonemes in the world, sounds of spoken language, how many phonemes or sounds do you think there are in the English language? How many? If there are 800 in the world, how many do you think we use on a regular basis in English? You go ahead and put it in the chat. See if you take a guess. Take a guess, wild guess. I'll give you a second. Any number. 800 total. How many do you think we use? Come on, be brave. Be brave. Nobody will judge you, I promise. 100. Sue says 100. Thank you. Alana says 200. Betty says 300. Dream 16 says 50. Well done. All right. There are many options, but in English, we actually only have 45 phonemes. So all of our words are created by just 45 individual sounds. Now, that doesn't mean that they are 45 different spellings of those sounds, because English is a combination of so many different languages, which is what makes it a little confusing to learn and to especially learn how to read and spell. But we have 45 individual sounds. So let's look at the next slide. Thank you so much for guessing. I appreciate that. Let's take a look. So here are some milestones. Everybody, kids always ask me, or the parents always ask me, at what age should my child be starting to talk? How many words should they have? At what age should they be reading? How many, what length of a sentence should they be writing at what grade? So here's some milestones from 0 to 5. And it really gives you an understanding of where an average child should be. Keep that in mind. There are some kids who are going to come to these milestones much faster, and some kids that are going to take a little longer to get there. There is a range, and it's a spectrum. And if your 18-month-old doesn't know exactly 40 words, you don't have to worry about it, because they will develop. But you do want to be conscious of what those milestones are, because in the language development centers of the brain, we can actually teach those skills explicitly. So if a student or a child is not meeting those milestones within a range, then the pediatrician or the speech and language therapist may suggest some games and some exercises to help move that child along so that they are able to communicate and to be understood. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. Next, super. So phonological awareness, we're going to talk more about this over the evening, but in a nutshell, that phonological awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate sounds within oral language or spoken language. And it's really the beginning stages of reading, but we need to have phonological awareness, the ability to recognize different sounds within language first. One of the things that we do know from much research is that children with learning challenges demonstrate difficulties with phonological awareness. And that is why I get up on my soapbox, and I'm not a very tall person, so, it helps me be seen, but that is why I really am a strong proponent of phonological awareness, this pre-reading skill, because the stronger your pre-reading skill is, the more success or chances for success you will have as a reader later on. We're going to talk all about that. That's really a big part of what I'm going to discuss this evening. But I do want you to know that when children have language delays, language processing challenges, or they are slower to talk, that is often a sign of weak phonological awareness. And when we have weak phonological awareness, it makes it more challenging to read in the future. Not impossible, but more challenging. So if you do have a child who has had some language delays, or is lagging behind their peers in some way, knowing about phonological awareness is actually going to give you a leg up and help you to prepare your child to be a reader in the future. Okay, we also know that if we look at studies and we're looking at reading success and spelling success, it all stems back again to that phonological awareness. All right, let's move forward. The beauty of it is that these skills can be taught. And that's the thing that I get most excited about, because if I can share my knowledge and share some activities and share the exercises or the games that we play with our students to you at home, you can be playing those games with your children as well. And again, building that really strong foundation. So I had a question. Do you mean no or child saying? Okay, so that's a good question. I think what you mean, Betty, I'm going to paraphrase and you tell me if if I'm on the right track. What you're asking is it about a child knowing the different phonemes or being able to say the different phonemes? And in fact, it's both. It's both being able to recognize them. So that's the auditory part, hearing them and being able to recognize them. And then the second part is generating, and that's making the sounds themselves. And they both work in tandem. So it's both, and that's a really good question. Thank you for helping me to clarify that. Okay, phonological awareness. This is the meat of it. Phonological awareness, as I said, is that understanding of spoken language, the sounds in spoken language, and being able to manipulate them. We have under phonological awareness, it's a big umbrella. We have the word parts, so where we're looking at syllables or the rhyming, the ends of the words that rhyme, or the beginnings of the words that are the same, like in alliteration, or even just entire words within sentences. And then on the other side, we're looking at the individual sounds, and that's the phonemic awareness. That's the ability to take a word like cat and break it into separate parts, k, at, or isolating one sound at the beginning or the middle or the end, or adding a sound or taking a sound away, or squeezing all of those together, or stretching all those sounds apart. All of those parts are phonemic awareness at the individual sound level. But we need both understanding of the individual sounds as well as the bigger word parts. So we're going to talk more about it. Don't worry if you're a little bit confused now. I'm hoping that it will all get settled and sorted out as we move along. Let's look at the next slide. So here is a slide of the letter names. So there's the alphabet on one side, and we have the different phonemes on the other side. And what you'll notice is we have alphabet on one side, it's alphabetical order, it's letter names. And a lot of people think, well, if my child knows the names of the letters, they know their ABCs, they should be ready to read. And in fact, it's not enough. It's not enough just to know the names of those letters, because the names of the letters don't really help you when you're trying to break a word down or decode it and put it back together to read it as a word. So we really want to teach the sounds of each phoneme, and we start with the sounds of the common letters. And you might notice in that chart that they are not in alphabetical order. In fact, they are in high frequency order. So how many people here may have seen Wheel of Fortune? I used to watch that after school all the time, love it. And the thing that you'll notice is that when they're solving a puzzle in the game show Wheel of Fortune, they have to, the contestant will choose a high frequency letter because they want it to show up as many times as possible in the puzzle so that they can solve it. They get as many clues as possible in one turn. So they'll often ask, you know, is there an S, a T, an M, a P, an R? These are the high frequency words, sounds. And we want to teach our kids those sounds first so that they will be able to sound out more words in a shorter period of time. So this is sort of jumping the gun of phonological awareness and heading towards that reading or emerging reading child. But this is why it's important to actually be able to hear, identify, and manipulate the sounds within words, because it's going to come back for our benefit when we go to read the words later on. Okay, let's move on. See if I've got any other notes I want to share. So let's look at how children actually learn to read. And this is the Big Five. These are the Big Five. They're in the year 2000, the National Panel on Reading in the US looked at over 100,000 studies on reading and determined that these 5 components are the trajectory that a child goes through in order to become a reader. They happen in a sequence. It's highly unlikely that you're going to go from number one, and jump to number 5. You're generally going to move in order, and they happen over a long period of time. And these skills are strengthened over and over again. So it's not as though you learn it and then you're done with it. It's something that is built on layers. So let's look at number 1 is that phonological awareness that we've been talking about. That's the ability to recognize the sounds within words and manipulate them. And a child has to have that understanding. And then they move on to the phonics. The phonics is being able to recognize the symbol of the letter, like A, B, C, and be able to put a sound with it. So if I see the letter A, I know that it's going to say A, or in the long vowel case, A. Or if I see the letter M, I know it's going to say and then as they build their let's say toolbox of sounds and symbols, they're able to put more and more words together in print or from print. So we've got phonological awareness leads to phonics. We get that understanding of that the sound and the symbols match. And then we move on to building vocabulary. And vocabulary can be built in several ways. Sometimes it's by sight words where you're teaching a word in its entirety because it's an irregular spelling pattern and it's just a word that a kid needs to know, like the word said, S-A-I-D. Definitely hard to sound out, but if you can recognize it, you can read it quickly in a sentence. And then building other vocabulary to add to what you need to be a fluent reader. Fluency is the fourth stage, so that's the ability to read at a particular speed with fewer errors. And then we move on to comprehension. And the comprehension, again, at different ages is, you know, there's a certain level that you're expected to know at grade 1, which is different than what you would need to know for grade 5 and different for what you would need to know for high school. So these 5 things, step 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 are really those early and emerging readers. And then as step 3, 4, and 5, we're continuing to build our vocabulary and to build our fluency and to build our comprehension as we mature. And I mean, even me, I will pick up an article sometimes and find a word that I've never seen before. I'll look it up and add it to my arsenal of new vocabulary words, or it just increases my comprehension. All right, let's look at the next slide. So why is phonological awareness important? I think we've talked a little bit about that already. There are decades, and I think it's even more than 30 at this point, but it's decades of research that shows us that it really plays a strong role in reading acquisition. And the stronger our foundation, the more success we will have as readers going forward. Best predictor of reading success and spelling success, so understanding how those sounds work. And it can be easily incorporated into play-based learning. That's what we do at Ruth Rhymac's Learning Space, is we really want to make it fun and engaging so that it's interesting and the child stays involved and wants more. The other thing I think is coming up on another slide is that it's an excellent, not red flag, but it's an excellent way to notice if a child may have reading challenges in the future. So it's a bit of a screening process. When a child has weaker phonological awareness, we are able to work with them to help them gain those skills so that reading will be easier in the future. I'm going to pause there for a minute and ask if you have any questions so far. Is there anything that doesn't make sense or you want some more clarification? Like I said, be brave. I'm very approachable. You can ask me anything. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Let's move on to the next slide and see what else we've got. This is the beauty, as I said before, about phonological awareness, is that it is not something that is innate. Some people have a better ear, they have a better auditory discrimination, and they can hear the sounds more clearly. Some individuals don't hear the difference, let's say, between I, the short I, and the short E, but it's something that we can teach. And that's the beauty, is that we can start to lay this foundation as early as, you know, infancy. And we'll talk about how we do that in a minute. Okay, let's move on. We have a question. No, we don't, not yet. So phonological awareness, that base skill, has 5 skills. It has 5 parts to it. And again, they also have a trajectory, or they have a sequence. So we've got rhyming, blending. Blending is squeezing things together. Segmenting is pulling words apart. The sound manipulation, and in fact, the alliteration is really first and in the first stages. So rhyming and alliteration come first, then we get blending, segmenting, and the very last stage is sound manipulation. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of them and give you some activities and some games that you can play with your kids. Let's look at the next slide. All right, so phonological awareness, skill, rhyming. So as I said before, there's a difference between just identifying that 2 things rhyme or generating your own rhyme. And the identifying skill comes first. And it might even come as early as 2, 2.5, 3 years old. This is why we innately, or let's say naturally, we have instincts to play language games and play with language with our babies, where we're babbling with them, we're repeating what they're saying, we're reading those early stories that are heavy on the rhyme, and we're also using, you know, finger play, Itsy Bitsy Spider, and all of the different games that you learned when your kids were little. these are setting the stage, these games and songs are setting the stage for that ear to be tuned to something like rhyming or alliteration. And why it's important again is because if you can hear that two words have the same ending, which is what a rhyme is, so let's say cat and bat. Fast forward, if you're 3 and you know that cat is the same ending as bat, and fast forward and now you're 6 and you're sitting down to write the word cat and bat, and you know that they both share the same ending of at, it makes it much easier to write both words because you already understand that they are going to be spelled the same way, both of them. So here's a game. What we want to do is help our kids hear that there is the same ending. So I might say something like, listen to the sounds at the end of these words. Are they the same? Or do these words have the same sound at the end? Do they rhyme? So we want to kind of get them attuned to the word rhyme, knowing that rhyme is when two things end the same way. And I also will say, look at my mouth. Does my mouth make the same shape at the end? Watch. Bat, cat. And sometimes just watching my mouth will help them differentiate between different sounds. Let's look at the next slide. So once we are attuning our ear to identifying rhymes, then the kids are starting to get used to it. They're having fun with it. It's fun to identify when two things have the same ending. And then they start to create their own rhymes. And I have to say, nonsense words are allowed. We want to encourage a play with language, and it doesn't matter if they're real words or nonsense words. It can be silly, it can be funny. In fact, the funnier and sillier it is, the more engaging it becomes. And what we want is for, again, that ear to be attuned. So can you think of a word that has the same ending as cat? And then you can play back and forth. The cool thing about language and our English language is that there are many words that have the same ending, and you can kind of play many, many different games. I'm going to show you one in a moment. I'm going to pause. Alana has a question. You mentioned spelling. What if a child's phonological awareness was strong in early years, however, is having continuous challenges with spelling? Reading is okay. So spelling has many components, of course. The phonological awareness, the ability to hear the sounds, is one part. But of course, because in English, our language draws from many other languages, Latin, Greek, Italian, French, etc. And we have many different ways to spell the same sound. And that's the trickiest part for most students, is that they may know that read has a long E in the middle, but they don't know whether that long E sound is made by two E's next to each other, R-E-E-D, or if it's R-E-A-D, or if it's R-E-D-E. And spelling is, again, one of those things that we can teach in a sequence, and we can teach the different sound combinations and the spelling combinations and practice and master, especially common words. But a lot of that has to do with practice and mastery, and making it clear that different spelling is going to create a different meaning. So even if your phonological awareness is strong, it doesn't necessarily mean, you are correct, that you will be an A+ or stellar speller, but it does help. So we need to have the phonological awareness to be able to break the words down somehow. But then, of course, because English is so complicated, we also need to do some practice and mastery to make sure that we're building a bank of spelling patterns. And that's something that can be taught explicitly as well. Okay, let's move on to the next. I hope that was helpful, Alana. So here's a game. We call it the rhyming car. And this is something that I would play with my, 2.5, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. Between that ages of 3 to 5 is really when these phonological awareness skills are going to be the most developed. We can lay the foundation early by reading lots of stories and playing with language and songs and talking to our kids all the time. But when they're really ready for it is between those ages of 3 and 5. They're primed. So rhyming car goes like this. You can use any kind of car with wheels. You can use a ball. You can use anything that you can pass back and forth. And you sit across from your child and you roll the car to them and you say, I say cat, and you roll it, they catch it, and then they turn it around and send it back to you with a rhyming word. So they might say, I say bat. And then we keep going back and forth as many times as we can with that one ending, cat, bat, fat, sat, mat, rat, as far as we can take it. Now, if your 3-year-old, you send the car their way, I say cat, and they turn it around and they say, I say mouse, that's okay. That's okay too. We don't ever want to say, no, that's wrong. I don't want us to squash their enthusiasm, but I might get them to say, okay, let's listen to that again. Listen, put your listening ear on and let's see. Listen if the ending is the same. Cat, bat, those two rhyme. How about cat and mouse? Do they have the same ending? So we want to practice and model what is a rhyme. And if they don't come back with a rhyme, that's okay. And the other part is you can again model for them. It might take a while. These skills are things that build over time, and not every child is ready for that stage exactly when we want to present the game. But it's something that, these games that I'm going to show you are little activities that you can do at any time. And you can kind of test the waters. Are they ready for it? Again, generating something, making it yourself is much harder than just hearing the difference. So you might want to start by sending the car one way, and then you give them the answer coming back and you say, does it rhyme or doesn't it rhyme? And try and trick them and see if they can follow along with that way. So being flexible, a child is not going to have the right answer always right away, but we want to model the right answer so they understand what is a rhyme and what isn't. All right, let's see. Let's move on. There's something else I need to tell you. That at the end of this evening, you will be receiving a handout from us that has all these games and more games and, an opportunity also to look at our resources that I'm going to talk about later. But just so you know, you don't have to take notes on every single thing. We are sending you a handout at the end of the webinar. All right, so let's talk about alliteration. Alliteration is the ability to recognize that words start with the same sound. Telescope, turtle, turkey. Again, I would get my child to look at my mouth. Is my mouth making the same shape? Mummy, mouse, muffin, and then get them to practice it too. You might even watch each other in a mirror, or have your child look at a mirror themselves to see if they can see that their mouth is making the same sound. Let's look at the next thing. Next, all right, so that's recognizing the rhyme, the alliteration, and then we want to generate. So we want to say, what's another word that begins with the same sound? Now, here's a tricky part, because sometimes the vocabulary of beginning or ending is actually more confusing to the child than asking them to recognize whether they are hearing or seeing the same sound or not. So sometimes I have to rephrase the question and model the answer, and then the child will kind of key into it. They'll go, oh, I get it now. I get it now. Okay, so here's a quick way to do it. You can do this while you're making breakfast, when you're putting your child to bed. I'm going to make up a silly sentence. Can you add another word to the sentence? Listen, all the words are going to start the same way. Brown, bears, by, and I might give them a clue. By, b, and then they add in the word by bells, by bugs, whatever it is. Silly sentences can become quite hilarious and can take as I said, take on a life of their own, and they can be nonsense too. You could make up a silly sentence and have something at the end that really doesn't even make sense, but as long as it starts with the same sound, it's okay. All right, let's look at the next one. So here is a game. This is a no prep game. You don't need anything for it, but you could have items if you wanted to actually show different items. So this is a game. I'm going on a trip to Canada. So in this case, we're choosing a place that starts with a particular sound, Canada. I'm going to pack, and I've got some things here to show, a cat, a can, and a candle. So the child first has to recognize what is the sound that we're practicing, and then they have to think of something else to add to the list. And a fun way, a good way to work the memory, your memory muscle, is to every time somebody adds a new item in the family, to repeat the whole thing again. So if I started with a cat, I might say I'm going to bring a cat, and my daughter will say I'm bringing a cat and a can. And then my son will say, I'm bringing a cat and a can and a candle. And you see how long your list can go while you remember all of those items. Tricky. I have to say the kids are generally better at that than I am. And usually when I mess up, they're the first ones to tell me that I'm wrong. Now, games like this, I started playing. I've got two kids. One of my daughter is 12 and my son is now 29. Yes, 29. And we play this game in the car. We've been playing this game in the car for seems like decades now. And even at 12, she will say to me when we're on long car trips, can we play the game, the car game? Can we play the trip game? So it's something that has become kind of part of our bag of tricks. And we pull it out whenever we need it, if we're passing the time or, waiting for an appointment to start. It's something to keep us busy, but it also was really instrumental in helping her build her skills early on. All right, let's look at the next one. All right, blending. Blending is the idea of taking individual sounds and squeezing them together. So we want to say a word really slowly and then have our kids squeeze it together and say it fast. It'll sound something like this. I would say, listen to these sounds. Tell me if you can say it fast. Notice I'm really enunciating, I'm really elongating those sounds. I'm also showing them how many sounds I'm saying or when I move on to a new sound. So the reason that I do this is to, again, differentiate between the three different sounds in this word. And the funniest part about this exercise, when the game that I play with my students, is that when I say, I want you to say it fast, somehow they think that means saying it louder. And so the first time we do this, I'll say this word really fast. Sun. And their first reaction is sun. And I take it back and I say, okay, let's try it again. And this time we're going to say it super fast, like this. Super fast. Sun. We're going to squeeze it together. The reason that blending is really important as an auditory skill or an oral skill is because, again, fast forward, when you know the sounds that the letters make in print and you're looking at that word trying to figure out what it is, you're going to have to use that skill. You're going to have to say a word really slowly, then you're going to have to blend it together in your head and say it out loud fast. So again, setting the stage for reading. All right, let's move to the next one. Next slide. So here is a game. This is in my bag. So this is just a plain bag. I've got a whole bunch of random things inside, but I've chosen them specifically because they're short words and they are easy to blend. So you can sing it to the song of Happy. If you're happy and you know it, I'll share my rendition with you. If you sure you know my word, yell it out. If you're sure you know my word, yell it out. If you're sure you know my word, then tell me what you've heard. If you're sure you know my word, yell it out. All right, then I'm going to look in the bag. I'm going to say this word really slowly. Rock. And if the child can say it fast and they get it correct, I'm going to pull it out of the bag and show, oh, I said rock, and I pulled out a sock. That was on the page and didn't have a rock in here. Okay, redo. Sock. And if they guess sock, then I'm going to pull that sock out. Any element, it's clean, don't worry. Any element of surprise or mystery is exciting, especially for those 3 to 5 year olds and even the 7 and 8 year olds. If they can't see it, it's that curiosity gap. If they can't see what's inside, they want to know, and so they're more attuned and they're listening. All right, let's look at the next thing. So you could have as many items in here as you like and choose, things that you can blend together easily. We're moving to the opposite. Now we're moving on to, so blending is squeezing sounds together. Segmenting is taking those words and pulling them apart. And this skill will be necessary later on for what we call encoding or spelling. If you have a word like rock and you want to spell it, you need to be able to break that word down into its parts in order to get it onto the paper. So hearing the word rock, we would hear r, k, and then we would have to transcribe the sounds that we hear into the symbols on the page. So segmenting has many parts. It can be part of syllabication, so looking at the different syllables in a word. So how many claps, or I define a syllable as a part of a word you can push out in one breath. So baseball, rabbit, jumping, etc. So syllabication, we have words that have one syllable, two syllables, three syllables, four. Moving on, some words have five. There are a few words that have more. And getting kids to divide into syllables is really helpful, because when they later go to print, they'll be able to take a long word and break it into big parts before they break it up into smaller parts to sound it out. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So here's how we take one word. The first slide that we just saw, the last slide, was really about breaking a word into big parts. And when we want to take it and break it into its smallest parts, we're looking for each sound individually. So let's say we have the word pig, and we want to draw it out or stretch it out into all of its parts, and we want to hear the different sounds, pig. Now, the second example, shark, is interesting because even though it has 5 letters, there are only 3 sounds. And we look at the first SH as one sound because SH together only says one thing, and that's sh. The AR come together because it's called a R-controlled vowel. Don't worry about that. But the A and the R make its own sound. So does OR and ER and IR. They all make their own sounds. And then the k at the end makes its own sound. So sometimes we may have a word with many letters, but fewer number of sounds. Let's look at the next thing. All right, so here's a game. Here's another element of surprise. And I have a shoebox here, and I've cut a hole in the lid. And this is a game where a child can reach in. Of course, you're going to stock it with things that you know can be segmented. And you choose, are we going to do it by syllables? Are we going to clap out the syllables? Or are we going to think about, hear the individual sounds? The big parts are easier to do, so start with those and then work your way to the individual sounds. So this one we're going to do with syllables. So I'm going to reach in and I'm going to pull something out. This is gorilla. And we're going to practice clapping out the sounds of gorilla. So I would show it. Gorilla, and show the sounds gorilla so that they know that there are 3. We have a class when we're allowed to do in-person classes called Alphamania, and Alphamania is a pre-reading class. And this is one of the favorite games of the 3 to 5-year-olds when we teach it in person, which is reaching in, pulling something out, and then clapping it out. And it's really funny because once we've had a few classes and they get used to the games and they get into them, we find that parents say to us, I don't know what you're doing in there, but suddenly my child is clapping everybody's name that we meet. Or it's time to go to bed and they're clapping out the syllables of the things in their room. And to me, that's like validation. That's like awesome. I'm so pleased. I'm so happy. And I say, well, then you know what? We're doing the right thing, because they are taking on the skills and they're practicing them. They're applying them. So gorilla goes back in the box, and you can put any number of things in there. You want to have a variety of 1 syllable, 2 syllable, and 3 syllable things. All right, let's look at the next one. I'm going to take so here we get to the last sound, the last stage. And this last stage is really the hardest. And often for adults, it's even difficult to do. So sound manipulation is the ability, it's really like sound gymnastics. We're trying to be really flexible with how we think about the sounds and how we can mix them up and change them around. So there are different parts about sound manipulation. One part is called sound deletion. So you're taking something away. And this, again, is really a hard skill. So don't expect that it's going to come right away. But with practice and with mastery, it will get better and better. So let's say I asked you, say the word jet without the j. And you have to think, okay, well, jet has 3 parts. J, et, but I'm going to take away the first one. What's going to be left? Just the et. And you can practice that with taking away the first sound. You can take away the last sound. You could take away the middle sound. That's the hardest because when you take away the vowel, you're just left with those two consonants and it becomes jut. But if your child is ready for it, it's such a great mental workout, and they get so excited when they actually figure it out because it takes, you see the wheels turning, you can see their brains trying to figure it out. And you just know that as they have that productive struggle, as they're trying to figure it out, their neural pathways are activated and they're getting stronger. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is sound substitution, the next level up, where you're taking one sound away and you're going to substitute it with another one. So I might say, take away the first sound in hit and replace it with a b. What do you get? Bit. Again, not easy to do, takes time, and takes lots of practice. Let's look at the next one. Dun, da, da, da. So here is a game. Here's a game with my animals. I've got more animals. So we're going to gather a collection of animals or pictures. You don't have to have actual things. And this is a game where you're going to put out a whole bunch of different animals and call out the name. I've got a whole bunch of lovelies here. You're going to call out the name of one of these animals or items, but you're going to take one of the sounds away. So I might say, find the what do I have? Find the Eiger. And the child has to look at what they have and then decide which one it is based on what they hear. And then that they can actually say the real name. And it's fun to do both ways because it's not just you that needs to practice taking a sound away and figuring it out, but your child should be able to take the sound away and give you the clue as well. All right, next slide. So let's do a quick wrap up about phonological awareness. It should be an early part of a child's life, and it comes in the form of playing with language, songs, stories, games, activities, silliness, nonsense words. The more you can play with language, the better. And have fun and laugh and enjoy that moment of just fun with your kids. It can screen for future reading struggles, which is, that's why I love it as a screener, because we can see where a child is having issues and we can really focus our attention on that aspect. It leads to future spelling success by teaching the students to break down the words into their parts and into the sound of language. And overall, it just encourages a joy for language and play. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment. Any questions so far? Most of this that we've talked about is really aimed at the younger kids because that's where the foundation starts. But if you have a child who is 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years old, who is not reading at grade level, who is struggling or having a challenging time with it, or challenging time with spelling, we would naturally go back to these phonological awareness foundations to build that strong foundation and then move forward from there. So that, it's like building a house. You can't have a rickety foundation and expect, the 3rd floor to stay intact. We need to make sure that that foundation is really strong first and then build your floors on top of that. Any questions? I know you're out there. All right, I'll let you type it for a minute. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Next slide. Okay, so resources for reading skills. I really noticed when I started this class called the Alphamania experience or Alphamania, which was a pre-reading class for 3 to 5-year-olds. The reason I started the class like almost 2 decades ago was because I was working with students one-on-one who were in grade 3, 4, 5, 6, who were really having reading challenges. And the more research I did, the more it led me to understanding how important phonological awareness was. And I thought to myself, well, if only I had met these kids when they were age 3 or 4 or 5, I could have helped them lay a foundation, or at least notice that they were struggling with that foundation and help build it up. And so we created the Alphamania class in order to give kids these pre-reading skills in a fun and engaging way early. But it wasn't enough because not everybody could come to the class. And I really felt it was my mission to share this information with the world. So we created a series of books called the Alphamania Adventures. And you can see them there on the screen, on the right. Left, that's my left. And in fact, I happen to have some here with me, right here. And what we did, because there are so many books about rhyming, there's so many rhyming books. I mean, Dr. Seuss and Boom Chicka Boom or Chicka Chicka Boom, Chicka Chicka Boom. Oh, now I'm having a mental block. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. You guys know it. I'm sure you know it. Lots of rhyming books. And there are even lots of books about alliteration. But there are really no books out there that teach kids in a fun way with a story about blending or segmenting or manipulating sounds within words. So we created a series of 5 books. And in these books are these alphamaniacs. These are the kids that live in Letter Lagoon. And they are a lovable bunch of characters. They're named for the short vowel sounds, and they have adventures. And each book, they have a different adventure. And it's a storybook that a parent reads to the children, but the children participate in the book. So when we get to, let's say, I love the splitter critter. Splitter critter is in segmenting. This little guy is the splitter critter. And he makes magic on the island when you break a word apart. So if you and you're prompted as the parent to read what word to break apart, and then magic happens on the island. They're trying to get away from some greedy pirates. I'm not going to spoil everything, but it's centered around pirates and it's lots of adventure. But the thing that I wanted to do with these books was actually create something for parents to go back to. So at the end of each book, there's a whole bunch of games and activities for each of these different skills, as well as background information for you, so you become more knowledgeable and how to share that skill with your child. So that's one thing. And then as we move from that age 3 to 5-year-old range, we then created a whole series of comics for phonics and sight words. And so we created a whole bunch of storybooks called the Yak Pack, and they are also done in a comic style. So for anybody who's emerging reading, just starting to read, we have a whole series on the phonics part, which is that individual sounds and symbol correspondence. And then we have a whole sight word pack as well. And if you look on your screen, there is a 15% off code, which I'm very excited to be able to share. You go to rumacresources.com, or you can go to ruthrumac.com. You can get there both ways. And you use the code reading5 and you get 15% off. So the books are, again, they work in sequence, and they will move your child from those emerging first stages of sound, symbol, letter correspondence all the way through to adding a vocabulary of sight words. So we're hitting all of the marks in those big 5 that the reading panel talks about. All right, let's look at the next slide. Oh, there are the Alphamaniacs. They're very cute. And Alex, Eddie, Izzy, Ollie, and Umber. Let's look at the next slide. There's some more pictures. We also put in another game so that it's not just about the skill we're teaching, but at the bottom you see there's a scroll and it says find the letters that these pictures begin with. So that's the phonics part. And there are hidden letters in the illustration. I think you can see them in the mountains in the background, but it's a guessing game, almost like a Where's Waldo. And some kids will actually just pick up the books to play the game, and they don't need the parent to read it to them because they're using the pictures and the clues at the same time. Let's look at the next one. And this is an example of the Yak Pack. So we have the phonics and a sight word. They're all done in a comic style. And we created the comic style so that it would appeal to older students who may not be reading at grade level yet, but they like that idea of a graphic novel. So it's easily decodable. It's easy to read in the phonics side, or if you look on the sight word side, on the right side of the screen, it actually teaches particular sight words in a series and scope so that you're learning a group of sight words at a time, and then you're gaining confidence because you can sound out or figure out most of the sentence. And if you don't know the word, we've provided the picture for it as well. Let's look at the next one. More pictures. I'm so proud of them. I just love them. They're great books. Okay, this is a little bit about what we do. We do the one-to-one instruction. It's direct instruction. It's multimodal. And even though we're online now, we have been able to be extremely interactive and taken that same multimodal and multisensory approach and worked it into the virtual online lesson, which is quite incredible. We use an interactive whiteboard, so we can play games. Things move around, they spin, the kids have access and they're able to move things around and to make the screens come alive. And at the base of it, again, we're really working on that research-based instruction, direct instruction, so that we're making sure that we're getting all the pieces as we move forward in the reading scope and sequence. And it's for all ages. We work with students as young as 3 all the way through to the end of high school and some university students as well. All right, what's our last slide? I think that we've got a last one coming up. Oh, that's us. If you want to find us, I'm going to open it up to questions. And if there, oh, somebody's got to run. Thank you, Betty. Little guy is woken up. Well, I appreciate that you stuck around so long. I'm so glad that you could be with us. And I'm going to open up to questions. And if you don't have any questions, I had a couple of questions that came in before. Now I need to find them. Before we started. Okay, so I'm going to answer a couple of questions, and I hope that you can stick around for a couple of minutes. One question I got were, how do you know if the kids are grasping the information that they read? And that's a really good question. I think as you're reading with your children, you want to be asking some comprehension questions, and not yes or no questions. Well, let's say comprehension questions have a level of hierarchy, and you can ask sort of the basic questions like, who is this story about? You know, who has the problem? Or where does the story take place? Or when? Those are basic levels. But if you ask why and how questions, how do you know that this character is going to survive the storm? Or why do you think that the witch gave the little girl the potion? So you're asking higher level thinking questions, and if you can get accurate answers, then you know that your child is in fact grasping what they're reading. So we have a question from Dream16. Do you know if you can apply these skills for French reading? Oh, thank you for asking. Great question. So what we know about phonological awareness is that if you have strong phonological awareness in one language, a child or an individual will apply the same thinking to another language, even though the phonemes are different. And in French particularly, in some ways, French is a little easier because they have, the phonemes are more distinct and they don't have as many crossovers as we do in English. So the answer is yes. If your child has strong phonological awareness skills, or if you want to build phonological awareness skills in French, you can use the same principles using French phonemes. Okay, I hope that answers that question. Thank you for that. If anybody else has a question, I'm up for it, and I'm going to answer another one here. How to build confidence and enjoy reading for kids with an LD or a learning disability or learning difference, and find books that, especially when kids find books overwhelming. So we always want to encourage a love of language. That doesn't always mean that you have to be reading it yourself. And I would actually encourage parents, even as their kids get older, to still sit down as a family and read together. I know that, I mean, my older son, who's 29, reads to my younger daughter, who's 12, and they have been reading the Harry Potter series. It's taken them a long time because they don't see each other, you know, they don't get a chance to sit and read for pleasure as much anymore. But they're working their way through that series, and she will only read the Harry Potter series with her older brother because that's their special time together. And even if your child can't read at their peer level or their grade level, but you can read the books with them that their classmates are reading, it allows them to participate in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. It still builds their vocabulary, it still builds their comprehension, even if they can't sound out those words at that higher level. On top of that, I highly recommend something like an audiobook where they are reading the book, following along with their eyes, and they're listening to it on something like audio, Audible from Amazon, or there's another, you can access a lot of online books from Libby, Libby, which is part of the Toronto Public Library. But there is a lot of research that says that as you read along, even if you're not sounding out the words yourself, your brain is actually increasing its fluency just by listening and following the words. So I highly recommend, even if your kids aren't reading at the level that you think they should be reading at, or that their peers are reading at, they can still be enjoying that book and that content by following along. Okay. Somebody says, what can I do to encourage a fondness for reading at home? I know, surround yourself with books, take the time to read with your kids, cuddle up, make a fort, get inside the fort and read, have a special place for reading, or a special reading pillow, or something that just delineates it from other parts of the day. What else? Somebody asked for some online book resources, and I would say that if you want to do reading online, Epic Books, EPIC, is a good one to check out. Vooks, which is VOOKS, and Raz Kids, which is a whole, they have leveled readers as well as decodable books. You can start from the very beginning and then move your way up depending on the level that your child is at, and they've got activities and comprehension things as well. That's Raz Kids. A lot of schools use Raz Kids, so you may be familiar with it from your child's classroom. And Starfall, STARFALL, is another one for beginner readers that practices a lot of these skills too. All right. I think that's about it. Any other questions? I'm so glad that you've stuck around, and I really appreciate your taking the time to listen, and I hope that some of these activities will make their way into your daily activities, even if it's just a few minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, one game, once or twice a week, and just start the momentum going. And if there's anything that we can help you with at Ruth Rhymac's Learning Space, we're always here. info@ruthrhymac.com. Check out the website and follow us and all of those things on social media. We're all over the place. And if any of you have any particular questions, I am happy to stick around if you want to unmute yourself and we can talk about it. But for those of you who have to go, I so appreciate your time. And I wish you a healthy and a happy evening, and that you enjoy the books, enjoy the time with your kids, and just go out there and have fun with language.